Alright, and welcome back to another vlog. I don't know how echoey this is, what we're about to find out. Boom, boom, we're back in the room. It's a bit echoey in here, but we're back with another vlog. We're at EMF. Look at this, we've got the pool behind us. We're in the ballet room. I call it the ballet room. It's not the ballet room, it's yoga, it's Pilates, etc. And today, yes, you've already guessed it by the thumbnail. I've got the gym behind me here, all the peeps doing their thing. And we're talking about the 5 biggest mistakes that I have made when in the past 5 years. 5 mistakes, 5 years. See what I did there? Very good. And the reason why I wanted to pick the last 5 years is because you get to a point, or you should get to a point in your training where, you know, people say, how long have you been training for? And you go, well, I've been training for probably 10 years, but I've been training smart for maybe like 2 or 3, right? So I say that, you know, and then you can always go, well, the next 5 years they actually count, because, you know, you should always be improving. So hindsight's a great thing. You always look back and think, shit, I could have known and done more. But anyway, fundamentally, I picked 5 years because I think that's when I really started to up the ante and start to train fairly intelligently, where, you know, I was in the intermediate stage and actually started to program a little bit more intelligently and start to move in the right direction. So I'm gonna go over with you the 5 things that I've picked. The main key areas, they're not just little nitty gritty things, they're more like broad strokes, and I'm gonna elaborate on them as well, and I'm gonna explain and share with you why I think these were the biggest mistakes, but also why they were the biggest learnings, because ultimately, you know, we've got mistakes, but it's all feedback. So I'm gonna share with you those in no particular order. So I'm hoping that you can get something out of this. Perhaps it's a mistake that you're making, perhaps it's a mistake you've made, perhaps it is, for example, something that you're not aware of. So perhaps I can bring it to your attention. So as always, guys, do me a favor before the video starts. Remember to like, remember if you want to comment, share something with me. If you want to see something, if you've made one of these mistakes, if you've got something positive to add, comment below, okay? And of course, remember to subscribe for weekly videos. I really appreciate it. It helps the channel grow. So without further ado, let's get into it with mistake number 1. Okay, so it's a little bit echoey, but hopefully I've rectified that on the sound. So the first mistake that I want to talk about, and I've mentioned this before quite a few times, is technique. The techers, mate, it's all about the techers, it's all about the technique, you know what I mean? I have no idea what you're saying right now. You know what I mean? The fucking techers, mate. What? The fucking techers, mate. You know, bing, bing, bash, bish, bosh, all that sort of shit. Anyway, to the point. Technique is probably one of the most, if not the most underrated elements when we're looking at actually training, or the training element in the gym. And the reason why is because it's not just what we do, it's how we actually do it. And I'll use a really broad and a very simple example. If it was as easy as just completing the exercises or the movements, why is it you can go into any gym anywhere in the world and 80% of the physiques in those gyms will be very underdeveloped? They'll be... Fuck is that? I'm in the altitude room, so I don't know. Anyway, we'll carry on. They're really, really underdeveloped physique. Like, they look maybe like they don't really train, or maybe like you wouldn't think that they train for over 5 years, and you wouldn't recognize that they train even with a shirt on nor a shirt off. Now, genetics aside, that is a sign that perhaps just doing those movements isn't quite enough. And again, leave nutrition and rest out of it. So when we actually learn to move through the ranges of motion, we actually use the muscles and we are more efficient within the movement. We can activate the muscles. We are in the proper posture, we're using the proper technique, we're activating the primary muscle groups within that movement, we're stabilizing, we're safe, etc. We are going to get far more out of each of those exercises. And this is some of the biggest things that we see in the gym, and it's something that I see. Again, I've mentioned it many times. I'm in the gym right now, I can look outside this window, and this is no disrespect, but I can see technique that is not even on par. Even if I'm not being super anal about it, I can actually go, hey, wow, there's always an improvement. Now, obviously, that's my area of expertise. I'm still learning, but this is something that I'm fairly well versed in. So we're going to help people. But by changing the technique, and again, if I had more coaches, if I had invested more time and perhaps more resources and more money, it's not always the case of money because you can get it for free online in the right sources, then I probably would have had a more advanced physique by now. And when I started using better technique and proper technique, I found that I got leaps and bounds of improvement, not only in strength development, but in physique development, okay, so muscle mass. And in terms of, I was obviously eating a sufficient amount of food and I was resting as well, so let's not leave that out, but that was a drastic improvement. That was a big step forward, and it was a huge mistake I made for years. I made a video on this. I bench strong for years, I squat terribly for years. Deadlift was probably the best out of the three, but it was still really not on par, and that correlated into many other movements that I did in the gym as well, which was the reason why I was probably cutting myself short or leaving a lot of gains on the table. So something to keep in mind is your technique. Always be upskilling, don't think you know it all. Always look at investing, always learn from more lifters. It doesn't mean that every lift is right and it's gospel, and the more advanced you get, the more nuance and individuality comes in, but if you can invest in a good coach, if you can watch good coaches and good trainers, people who walk the walk and talk the talk, okay, because there's a lot of people who have just got it from one angle, so they might look good, but they actually can't do it for other people, or for example, they look shit, but they're actually really good at coaching. Try and find, again, a multitude of people who kind of have a bit of both, but again, one or the other, and take something positive from each, because you can learn something from anybody. And if you can apply that to your own training, and if you're a trainer, you can start learning that for your clients and know how to nuance it and know how to apply that to different clients, because everyone's slightly different. So you might need to use a different language, or you might need to set it up slightly different. A squat's a squat's a squat's a squat. But when we look at it under a microscope, the way we all squat might be invariably different from a mechanistic standpoint, because we've got different limb lengths, etc. So something to keep heavily in mind there for you guys. All right, so that's point number one. The second one is intensity and volume, and what I mean by that is how hard I was actually training and how much volume I was actually doing. So there was a period within this 5 years where I was doing just way too much volume, and from what we know, from what the current research has confirmed, is that if we do too much volume, too much intensity, we're not going to grow, and if we don't do enough, we're also not going to grow muscle tissue. And that's what we're here to do, right? We're here to get jacked, we're here to look good, we're here to grow some goddamn muscle. So, I think having a more pragmatic approach and understanding recovery, understanding RPE, understanding, how much volume that I actually needed. So like having an MRV, a minimal recoverable volume, and also a minimum effective dose as well. So I could actually progress rather than guessing, and having better tracking tools and metrics so that I could actually do it. And in terms of intensity, it was a point where sometimes I was just pushing way too hard in the wrong times, or at the wrong times with the wrong weights. And there was other times where I was probably just not training hard enough. An example is for the big compound movements, you want to have a bit more of a decisive and an accurate approach, especially when you get past the beginner phase. You definitely, if you want to be building strength, having a plan and knowing how to work with certain loads for certain reps and certain intensities. And for your isolation exercises, you know, you don't have to be as specific, because single joint movements, low risk, high recovery, you can really take those things to failure. So again, just doing too much or not enough volume, and the same with the intensity too. So be aware of this. Know when to push hard, know when to pull back, and have that in a segmented approach. Bit bright, isn't it? Yeah. The next point is accuracy with nutrition. So, for example, back in the so within the last 5 years, I've noticed I've got more accurate, and not just with tracking. So, for example, when you first start with nutrition, you are very, very much a fish out of water. And it can be quite overwhelming, especially if you've never tracked before, or you're going into the realms of tracking via MyFitnessPal or something like that. So being able to actually understand and be accurate with the tracking tools, but then also carry that over and be able to do it without using the tracking tools and still get within the ballpark, again, was a massive learning curve for me. You'll often find that when someone does start tracking and then they do get the hang of it and they do end up understanding the principles, that they do have trouble then being able to conversely go back and navigate themselves back to not tracking, or having days where they don't track, or having days where they generally want to then eat mindfully, and then slowly over time being able to overlap that, where they can still gain and then still cut effectively without being so about the numbers. This often causes a lot of anxiety, and I know that for me, it definitely did in the early days when I was going from not tracking, where I had to track every single thing on the scales all the time. And I started to realize that that was a bit of a problem, because it can end up being as much a psychological disorder as it can be a nutritional eating disorder. Because if I was eating something, I feel the need that, wow, I've really got to track that all the time. And I know some of you will be able to relate right now. And look, in the early days, that might be okay at the start, but then we need to address that, because if this is going to be a lifestyle and this is going to be something that's sustainable, we can't bring scales with us everywhere, and we can't weigh every piece of food. And even if we did, that's just not a micromanaging lifestyle you want to lead. Trust me, that is a rabbit hole and a very, very slippery slope. So something that I would advise, if this is you, is learning how to transition into eating mindfully. And there's some really good resources on that from the likes of 3DMJ and those guys, from how to transition from tracking to be able to eat mindfully and still achieve your goals, amongst a lot of other professionals that I've had on my podcast as well. So make sure that, again, if you're not subscribed to that, shameless plug, Spotify, Twitch, iTunes, everything. It's Raw Knowledge, Fearless Training Raw Knowledge podcast, where I talk to some of the best practitioners, psychologists, coaches, nutritionists alike on nutrition, as it's such a fascinating subject to me. So having that accuracy, and then also understanding when not to be so tied to the numbers and not have to be so specific, but then also knowing what is actually in food, and using that education that I've had via tracking it over the years to then correlate that over and go, well, I know how much protein is in this, I know how much fat is in this and carbs, I know that this is a high calorie meal, I know this is a low calorie meal, and kind of putting those broad strokes and main principles together so I can effectively have a lifestyle that's balanced, especially when I'm not in comp prep mode and I don't have to be so specific or so on the ball, but I can still achieve and move closer towards my goals. The next point is progression. And that kind of leads on from the intensity and the volume, but in a different way. Now, when we think of progress, a lot of the time initially when we get in the gym, we just want to put more weight on the bar. And there's only so long we can do that before we just can't add any more weight to the bar, or we're just going to get an injury. And this is obviously something we generally all make the mistake of doing when we're beginners. But as I've said in other videos, progression comes in many forms, right? So we've got reps, we've got rest time, we've got quality technique, we've got sets, we've got load progressions, there's percentage-based lifting. There are just so many different avenues for progress, and ultimately weight is not the only driver. So understanding that, for example, when I was progressing, or when I wasn't progressing, having a better strategy. So I didn't really understand things like weekly undulating periodization or daily undulating periodization. Although there's nothing magic about those things, it's just a matter of knowing when to undulate your volume and know that, hey, if you have an interest in strength and size, at some point, you can't be playing around with the same loads, the same reps, and the same sets. You've got to have some sort of undulation. And if you have a plan and a strategy, and you are using that based on what you're lifting, you're using a percentage of your 1 rep max, you're actually gauging that, and you're then able to progress over time by, again, using different loads on different days for different rep ranges, training those specifics. And again, depending on what you want to achieve, if you're more based around strength, you might be practicing those strength movements more often because strength is a skill. And if your goal is hypertrophy, perhaps it's less so, but you still might have an interest in doing the main movements. But again, you're putting more emphasis on the volume and more into actually overloading rather than just trying to train for the skill of strength in those sort of squat, bench, and dead movement patterns. So that was probably a really, really big breakthrough for me. No, it wasn't probably, it was a really big breakthrough for me when I learned how to actually undulate volume and again, combined with that technique, be able to actually progress the loads over time, not only the volume but the intensity, and then actually cause overload and do it in a way where I was able to sustain it and not kill myself and maintain a really good form and really good technique. And that was and that allowed me to actually build more muscle and build more strength. And obviously strength and hypertrophy, strength and size, have a relationship and they go hand in hand. So learning how to progress, when you're a beginner, you can throw any shit at a wall and something will stick, but then after that you need to know how to actually have a progression strategy. You need to understand, okay, how to play around and manipulate volume, frequency, and intensity to your desires, to your actual goals, so your actions align with them. Another beautiful winter's day in the GC, in the Gold Coast. And the last point here is mindset, education, and accountability. So what is the mistake here? Well, the mistake initially was not putting enough emphasis on education and perhaps not doing it as regular. And it was also having the wrong mindset a lot of the time, where I was second guessing myself, or I didn't really believe, or I didn't really have faith in the process. And this is completely normal. But had I relaxed a little bit more and educated myself and understood the principles, I would have found that I probably would have enjoyed parts of the journey a little bit more by not stressing out over the details, because I knew that I was getting the big things in the right place, and that if ultimately I just chipped away every day and I did the things that contributed to success, then it was just a matter of time. But then also being present, because we don't live in the future or the past, and I've said that a lot, and it's really obvious, but most of us do, right? And it would have been much better to just be in that moment, or be perhaps a little bit more present at times and enjoy it a lot more, rather than stressing over the small details and overthinking things and having anxiety. And a lot of that comes with education, because we fear what we don't understand. And if we understand something more and we educate ourselves, we have more confidence and we have more awareness around what is working and why it's working, and then we can be more aligned. It's sort of like our compass guiding us in the right direction with the ethics and the values, and whatever the goals are, the actions should line up. And again, it's these concepts are so simple, but many of us are just overlooking them, or we're not doing them. And accountability, who coaches the coach? Who cleans the cleaner? Who teaches the teacher? I have a coach. I have coaches. I have people that I check in with. I have people that hold me accountable to my goals and keep me on the straight and narrow and tell me when I might be, you know, I need to sort my shit out or tighten up the screws, or when I'm being silly and overthinking things. And that is completely invaluable, and I'm always looking for those people and always trying to improve the people I surround myself with and invest time in, because ultimately, you know, the 5 people that you surround yourself with, as you've heard, are the people that you generally adopt those principles off. And it doesn't mean you can't spend time with other people, but you know, you do got to be mindful of who you spend your time with and who you're learning from, and establishing and creating those relationships which have mutual benefit, because as we teach, we also learn. So being able to pay that forward is great too. So I would very, very much advise for all of you listening, coach, client, no matter who you are, no matter where you are on your journey, invest in education consistently, constantly educate yourself, have a positive mindset as hard as it can be. You know, you're going to go through phases of adversity, and acknowledge it. When you're stressed, you're stressed. When you're happy, you're happy. When you're excited, you're excited. Don't try and push the emotions away. It's easier said than done, but try and create a stronger mindset by investing in education and being aware of what you're doing over time and how to actually improve, if you truly do want to improve. And then having some accountability by finding a mentor, finding a coach, finding someone who's going to hold you accountable for whatever it is that you want to do, and someone that has got the knowledge to be able to actually get you to the next level. Again, someone who practices what they preach and walks the walk and talks the talk very well. Anyway, guys, I'm going to wrap the video up there. I hope that has helped. I hope you can take something out of that, out of my mistakes. They're my top 5 that I can think of at this present time. And I'm sure there's more, but they're very broad strokes. There's obviously a lot in there. And again, they are the things that stick out to me that I will continually work on. And there's always things that we need to work on as well. And that's all part of the journey, and that's what makes it great. Because if we had all the answers and if everything was perfect, then it would just be useless and it wouldn't be fun. So on that note, guys, remember, if you like the video, remember to like the video, comment if you've got something positive to say, share it with someone who perhaps is making these mistakes or perhaps needs a bit of a wake up, and also subscribe and make sure you click that bell icon. Click that bell icon as well and subscribe for weekly videos. Guys, I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. And in the meantime, as always, stay fearless.